Welcome back to another video for our Great Guitar Build-Off entry, and boy did I underestimate how much stuff I was going to have to squeeze into this one. My initial thought process was, first video was be getting everything ready to cut the body shape out. This video would be everything ready up for finishing. Video for finishing, maybe a video for wiring as well, but I think in the end I'm probably going to combine those last two. But since last year, I kind of forgot how much work actually goes into prepping everything for finishing once you've got the initial shape routed out. So in this video we've got a bunch of carving, a bunch of sanding, a bunch of shaping and reshaping, and a bunch of staining at the end. Anyway, let's get into it and pick up where we left off. First things first, we need to get our top glued together. There was a little bit of joinery involved off screen to make sure that those fit flush up against each other. But honestly, that tape is all you really need to work as clamps when you get that thing glued together. I did clamp down the top a little bit though, just to make sure that everything stayed flat and didn't try and warp. I have a very dry environment where I live, and even the water from that glue can make things warp. And then on to neck carving. And my little helper decided to come and take an interest in the camera. I had to keep him from climbing on the table. Got some files out to shape that volute the way I'd kind of like, and the same around the heel area. And by then that top was glued up well enough that I could cut it out. Oversized slightly, but pretty close to shape. Now it's going to be a while before I actually glue it to the top, but I do the old masking tape and super glue trick to keep them together so I can get some work done. Like routing it to shape. And then we got some back cavities routed. First the control cavity, because it was easy to line up. And made a huge mess. That was a big chunk of wood that you have to drill out. Got the neck pocket. Then our pickup cavities. And then I didn't have any real templates for the back, so I had to make my own for the battery box inset and cover for that. That looks like a charm. And then after a little bit of math, we got the inlays cut. I did that before I cut the fretboard to shape in this instance because I knew I wanted them to fall over the edge, and with a resin pour it was just much easier if I could make it clean cut and not have to worry about filling the gap as things fell over the edge or things like that. Did a two-tone, blue and purple, and kind of let them blend into each other to kind of match what we were thinking for the top colors. Then we lightly cut the fret slots. I had lined those up before already just to make sure that I knew where to put those inlays, of course. I did that mostly so that I wouldn't risk getting it off in the end. And then I used a planer just to get the excess resin off, which took a little bit more time than expected. I always find it's a lesser sin to overfill than underfill those. Once we were there, we had our neck template. We could get that routed to the correct shape with a little bit of excess above the nut area, and radius set the way we would like, which is again this here a compound radius, 12 inch at the nut down to about a 20 on the 24th fret.
after we chopped off that excess bit above the nut, we can get that thing glued on by using every clamp in my shop. I seem to have a consistent problem with not having enough clamps. It happens again later when I get the body top glued on. Now, before I glue that top on, went ahead and routed some cavities for wires to run through, make things easier in the end. And then I have to get a little channel to get to truss rod access on the body. Now that one I did not use a router for, I used some hand chisels. It just seemed a lot easier in the end because I had one of those sharp corners on it, if nothing else. Perfection. Almost. Not perfection. Since I don't have an edge marking guide, I used an old compass to kind of roughly mark where I wanted to carve the top to. Worked out pretty well, actually. And that Shinto rasp took the edge off pretty perfectly and pretty quickly. This is where I was a little nervous that maybe the top hadn't glued on very well, but luckily it all glued down perfectly, despite the fact that it tried to warp really bad with the amount of wood glue that was on it in my incredibly arid environment here. And then my oversized back plates had to get sanded flush with the body, or near enough to flush that I could then use a planer to get them down perfectly. And we drilled our access for the jack. And it was time to do the promised headstock veneer. So we cut that out, glued it on, again with a lot of clamps, just to be safe. Now after I got this on, I realized that it was a very thick headstock veneer at 1/4 inch like the top on the body because it was from the same piece. So I did do a considerable amount of sanding to get it down to a more reasonable height. But before that, got that routed down to size as well. And then we were doing some fretting. I'm a big fan of hammering them in rather than using a press or a caul. Granted, I haven't tried the alternative, but there's something really satisfying about hammering them in, especially using a dead blow hammer. Nip off the ends. And file down those rough edges. And then we use some mineral spirits to kind of clean off the guitar, get it ready for staining, make sure there wasn't any dust left over on it. And boy, does that make that top come to life. First we did a coat of black that we then sand back quite a ways so that it just kind of hits the deeper parts of the grain and accents that a little bit. Tried to save you all from watching me sand too much, but some parts of it are inevitable. I know that's probably the least interesting part of anyone's build. And then, of course, some staining. We went with a 3-tone burst from a blue to a purple to a black, all courtesy of Crimson Guitars. The purple kind of got lost in the mix a little bit, I think, because it ended up being a lot lighter of a purple than I was expecting. But the blue to black looks great, and you can, in the final finish, see a little bit of the purple. It's just a little more subtle than I was anticipating. I debated whether to just stain up to the edge of the top and leave the rest of it natural, but in the end I kind of wanted to do the burst all the way around, including on the back, where instead of using the other colors I just used some water to feather that in, as it is a water-based stain. And that gives it kind of a very nice kind of tobacco-y burst on the back there. And then to do the same trick on the headstock, which in such a small area proved a little tricky, but I think we got it to blend out pretty well. I discovered really that just doing straight strokes worked better on such a small area, but
And that's about the point where my camera died. But I just couldn't help myself, so I continued doing a little more staining on that headstock, tweaked the stain a little bit, got a logo on there as well, and it's now at the finishing booth to be sprayed, which you'll get to see in the next video, thanks to a generous benefactor. But anyway, that's taken us pretty far along, so we're now in the stage of putting some polyurethane finish on the guitar, and hopefully before long we'll have some electronics wired up, and we'll get to see this thing in action. Thanks guys, catch you next time.